right, this is my paper 1911 slide, and for those of you who wanted a tutorial on how I made this, I'm going to give that to you now. This is just the front profile there. What you're looking at here, the silver piece, is known as the barrel bushing, and the barrel bushing serves two purposes. It aligns the barrel in the slide, and it also holds in the recoil spring / guide rod and guide rod plug, so that when you're cycling the weapon, those pieces stay in where they should be. And so that's a spring there and a guide rod. There's two ways to make the recoil spring. You can either use a guide rod or not use a guide rod. I chose to use a guide rod simply because it makes this whole process faster and just kind of keeps everything together. You could probably do it without a guide rod. I think some people have made this without a guide rod and had okay success, but for me I use a guide rod because it's easier. To remove the barrel bushing, you push it on that plug, turn it, and then pull it out. Let me try that. There we go. Oh, that was easy. And then the barrel slides out through the front. And that's the barrel. I think you guys have seen this before in another video. The inside of the slide, I painted it going in a little bit of the way, but not all the way. It really doesn't make a difference inside. I'll probably remove the rest of the paint just to keep it uniform. What you can see here, or should be able to see, this is the barrel bushing, and the barrel bushing has a square lug on it right there. I'm pointing out with my thumb, and that lug locks in inside. There's just a slot cut in there inside the slide, and so when you put the barrel bushing in, you put it in at an angle and turn it, and then when it turns, now it's locked in. It's not going anywhere. I mean, it's a little bit of wiggle room, but it's not coming out. And then remove it, I turn it, and then it pulls right out. So that's how that works. The guide rod plug is a pretty easy piece to make. As you can see, it's slightly thicker in the middle, and it tapers off in the end, and that's to allow it to just be held captive by the bottom of the barrel bushing easier. And that's what that looks like. So pretty easy to make. There's a slot cut on the bottom, and that slot intersects with a little lug in there. You can see it's just a little round piece, and so when I'm installing this, it just sits in right like so. And what's nice about that is I cut the slot and fitted the lug so that it won't slide forward normally than it usually will, but it'll push back. So when I'm installing the barrel bushing, I can put the spring in and push this piece back in while it's under spring tension, put in the barrel bushing, and then turn it, and then that can move forward. And then the barrel bushing pushing down keeps that guide rod plug locked in place, so it's not going to flip up and fly out. So that's how those two pieces fit together. And again, this is very simple. This is a paper stick that I made. I used Q-tips to make the base of it, and I just wrapped paper around it and glued it, and you can see it fits pretty smoothly. So that's how I made the guide rod, and it's just two springs that just fit on top of it. The end here is designed to fit inside the frame right there, so it literally sits in there, and then it can be pushed back, and it's not going to fly back and hit the link pin or anything with the barrel. So that's how that's supposed to work. So I mean, these parts are all pretty easy, and you know, you just kind of have to learn how to hand fit them together and make them work. This part you may or may not have seen before, but this is for the barrel link pin. It just fits in right well on the other side, actually. It just holds the barrel into the frame. So pretty straightforward. Back to the slide. Making the slide, you break it down to a couple pieces, and the first thing you'll notice when you look at the overall shape of the slide is that it has a flat side. on both sides. Obviously, it's flat, and then it's round on top. So when you're making that, you want to make a round form underneath to give you the base, and then you add the flat pieces on the side. And it's really simple to do that. This is a piece of cardboard that I cut out, and it's not the exact right shape, but it gives you kind of an idea. First thing I did was I made a piece of hardened paper, just a long rectangle, probably 10 layers thick or so. And all I did with that was I just cut it into the shape of the slide, which look at blueprints to get the measurements if you need them. And I made one of those for each side of the slide, so I made two. Then I used a notebook here, which I had, and I wrapped paper around the edge of it, taped down like a bottom base layer of paper, and then just glued paper over the top of it. And so when you're done with that, or when that dries, you need maybe 5 or 6 layers. I only did 3 here because it's just kind of a representative example. You just remove this after you've used this to build a form off it. It should just peel right off, and then you're left with a rough shape of a slide, which that's how you get that curved piece. Then you cut out the inside of it, and I'm moving kind of quickly here. If I was doing this again to make one for actual use, I'd be stopping to make a lot of measurements and make sure everything's exactly right. There we go. Very easy. Get that nub out of there. Cut down the rest of the side here. And the blue paper in there, it's just construction paper. It doesn't matter. That's not significant or anything, so don't worry about it. Okay, so you'll notice that this is not as tall as the actual slide, and the reason for that is that it would sit kind of like that, and the bottom of this slide form would stop at the top of the rails. So with my frame that we're looking at here, the slide form that I made would sit on top of the rails, and that's how I would measure it, is to sit up here like that. And then this piece isn't smooth enough, but if I was making this correctly, this piece would be able to slide back and forth over the top of the rails on both sides without impacting anything, and I mean without there being any, without either impacting the hammer or without having there be a gap between the top of the rail. It needs to be very, very smooth because this is meant to slide back and forth on the rails, and so this needs to be very smooth and very level. And so take your time and make sure that it's as smooth and level as possible, because that's going to be critical. Then you take your flat piece that you made, and pretend this is 10 layers thick of paper. Now to make the rails, I would literally just take paper, put a thin strip of glue along the bottom edge here, probably about 1/8 of an inch, and then put paper over that glue, and just build up a rail that's about 1/8 of an inch from there to there, and just build that up. And that's how you make that rail that you see on the bottom here. Is just you do that with the flat piece before you attach it to anything, and just pretend that that's 8 or 9 layers thick, or however thick it needs to be to fit inside that groove there. And again, when you're done with that, you want to file it down and make it as smooth as possible, because the whole purpose of that is to slide back and forth on a slide as easily as possible. So that's pretty much what you want to be doing. Once that's done, it's really easy. You just glue these pieces together, and that's how you kind of get the basic shape of your slide. Now to build this front curved piece here, it's not as hard as it looks. What you do is you take just kind of another piece of paper, and this is just kind of a junk scrap that I'm using, but you take another piece of paper that you just kind of built up 6-7 layers thick around a smaller book or a curved object or something, and then you cut a notch into it, because you want to keep in mind that you're going to have to put a barrel bushing, and have that lug fit in. So what I would do is I would figure out where my barrel bushing is going to be and where that lug's going to be, and I would cut a notch into it for the lug to sit in. So then when I install that, I have a space for my lug and my barrel bushing to go into. Then I take a piece of paper like this. Doesn't have, obviously, it'd probably printer paper because I don't use construction paper a whole lot other than for illustrative purposes. I glue the construction paper or whatever paper I'm using inside the front of my simulated slide and pretend that that's the flat piece on the side. Once it's in there, I cut it off so I have some flaps hanging out of the front of my slide. And then I take this piece that I made and I place it inside, and I glue the flaps to the outside of the curved piece. And that gives you, and this obviously is very, very crude, but that gives you kind of the idea of how you make that shape. So this bottom curved piece winds up being much smaller than the outside curved piece. And you can kind of see from looking at it how these are two separate pieces. That's a curved piece, and that's a curved piece. And then I just glued them along this inside edge and right there as well. And that's really all there is to it. And then you can just cut really thin strips of paper and glue them in here to just kind of build up a gradual, curved shape. So it's not just like a straight line. And then you see how I kind of have a curve there, which is I just basically gluing thin strips of paper to build up that shape until it was the way I wanted it. The top sight here was simple. You just Dremel out a slot, make 15 or so layers of paper, cut it into the right shape, and just glue it on in there. I mean, this is all pretty simple stuff. The slots on the side I made with a file. I don't have the slide stop slot cut in yet. I just haven't done it. I'm still trying to polish out the rest of this and just tweak little things here and there. When it comes to building the rear, you can kind of see the shape here. That's a spot for my my extractor to slide into and fit. And basically the extractor just runs, it's just a pin that has tension on it, and it runs all the way down the inside and has a little hook that grabs the end of the case there. The firing pin channel's in the center, and on this side it has to be kept kind of raised because it needs to be able to let the ejector pass through it. So if I was putting this together, you would just be able to see kind of offhand how that piece sits in there. So and that's how, it's just layers of paper and coming with the right shape and stacking it. You want to keep yourself a slot in there, and that's where you put the firing pin stop. And it's just a flat piece that slides in to keep the firing pin from popping out backwards, and to also hold in the extractor. Now, for actually positioning the firing pin, there's a couple ways to do that. This is the barrel, and this is the firing pin. You can use a nail or, just basically any thin, straight piece of metal. I used a coat hanger for this, actually, a wire coat hanger. I just cut a length of it, and this is a 45 ACP casing that's been fired. And you see how it sits in the barrel. Pretty simple. Now I put the firing pin just coming out of there to kind of help me get an idea of where that firing pin is going to come out of. And in this case, that's where I'm going to want to have my firing pin channel. And actually, I had this all put together, and then I ripped apart my firing pin channel to realign it to try to get more reliable ignition when I'm just shooting test rounds, low pressure test rounds out of this, just for function. So that's what I'm currently in the process of doing, is just trying to realign the firing pin channel. I would recommend not building the firing pin channel until the gun's done, simply because it depends on where your barrel locks up. If your barrel locks up higher than you think it will or lower, it's going to be off center, and you're not going to be hitting your firing pin on your primer. So that's what you want to watch for. Now, you'll know that there's lugs in here. There's two lugs. I removed them right now because I'm working on lining everything up. The easiest way to make those lugs is to make them ahead of time. Just cut out thin strips of paper the size of those slots there. Glue them together until they're flush with the barrel. Then put a thin layer of glue on them, and then just literally install them with your barrel, press them, put them on the gun, or put them in the barrel and just push the barrel down the slide. And then when you remove the barrel, after they've dried, they'll be right where they need to be, and that'll help lock up your action. So pretty straightforward. One more thing, as far as the bushing, to reinforce this piece here, that's not moving at all. It's very rigid. If that was just paper, it would have given out a long time ago. So what I did was I took some pins, folded them into a 90-degree angle, and then stuck them in like that. There's actually 3 pins in there. There's one running like that, one in the middle, and one on the other end to make up those kind of pronged tips and give it a lot of extra strength. And then I just super glued them in and wrapped paper over it and painted it, and now it's a really solid, rigid piece. So that should give you just kind of some clues and tips for how to make a 1911 slide. It's not as rough, and it's mostly cosmetic. I mean, getting functional is the important thing, and just making sure that these rails are really smooth and slide back and forth easily on the frame is the thing you really want to focus on. That's about it. Thanks.